All right, good afternoon. It is 3 o'clock on Monday, October 13th, and I would like to call this special meeting of the County Employees Retirement System Ad Hoc Employer Reporting Review Committee to order. Mr. Bronco, would you read the opening statement for the record, please?
Yeah. This is a regular meeting of the County Employees Retirement System Board of Trustees Ad Hoc Employer Reporting Review Committee, or a special meeting, I mean. This meeting is being broadcast via video teleconference pursuant to KRS 61-826 and may be viewed by the public at the Kentucky Public Pensions Authority offices located at 1260 Louisville Road in Frankfort, Kentucky. It is also being broadcast to the public live via Facebook. If you are speaking and not appearing by video, please identify yourself before talking. If the video or audio broadcast is interrupted, we will attempt to reestablish a connection. If a connection cannot be reestablished within 30 minutes, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled to a later date.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bronco. Ms. Rankin, would you call the roll and confirm the presence of a quorum, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Webb?
Here.
Dr. Carver?
Here.
Mr. Fulkerson?
Here.
Mr. McGraw?
Here.
And Mr. Cheatham?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rankin. And do we have any public comments?
Yes, sir. We do have one public comment, and I will read it at this time. This comes from Tanya Smith, and she writes as follows. Online training documents are outdated. In-person training for new HR personnel should be done biannually. Chat option for customer service. A more searchable resource or quick how-tos for individual subjects. Provide a template for the file submission. Make this a process more simple and take out roadblocks. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment, Ms. Smith. I will ensure this comment gets to the full CERS Board of Trustees. We'll move on to item 5A, employer reporting compliance and education a video presentation. Ms. Rankin, I'll let you make the introductions.
Sure. I'm working on getting this shared, and while we do that, just wanted to preface this by indicating that this is a video from that we actually were able to get Rebecca on before she left, Rebecca Atkins, before she retired. This is a project that she's worked on for many years in conjunction with Dwan and the staff of ERCE. So we wanted to record this and provide this as information for this meeting. And so I'll go ahead and get this started if you're ready, Mr. Webb.
Yes, please.
Can everybody see the video so far?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, as we said, Mr. Webb, this is
Let me check. Oh, goodness. I apologize. I can hear it on my computer, but I'm not for sure.
this is a project that we've been
Can you all
looking at
hear
and thinking
that?
of
No.
for a long time, and we're going to give you a quick history here pretty soon.
You can hear that, Sherry.
You can?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I am really excited about this committee. I think this committee will have an opportunity to look at a lot of details of this and provide great feedback. While I am retiring, Dwan Surratt is the executive director of Employer Reporting Compliance and Education, and he's terrific and has a lot of information and can be available to you. Of course, Ryan is available as well for anything that you want to look at. So just quick, the statutory ability here. This is from a KRS 61, Chapter 61 does KERS The only time that we're required to do audits is 615991, which is specific to KERS non-hazardous quasi-governmental employers who are getting a special subsidy from the legislature, and because of that subsidy, they want us to audit something. So they require the board to set the percentage. The board said audit 5 of them a year. So those we've been doing since 22, but that's the only required audits that we have. The audits that we're talking about are compliance audits, and they are for CERS and for KERS, and they are covered under 78625. Subsection 5 says system may, doesn't have to, but it may at any time conduct an audit of the employer in order to determine if the employer is complying with the provisions of KERS 78510 to 78852. That's most of the, actually that's all of the CERS statutes. So the idea is you can audit them. It doesn't give us carte blanche on audit, but it does give us the ability to look at payrolls and things like that to make sure that they're reporting as they need to report. So that's the statutory authority. Giving you a little bit of history for employer reporting. Back in 2013 is when we changed our line of business system significantly. At that time, before the START system, we had employers gave us 7 fields: name, social security number, salary, contributions. That's about it. We increased that to 49. It says 53, but those extra few are for a header row that don't count. So it's really 49 more fields. So errors went up greatly. Editing went up greatly. That's where we ended up spending our time. Pre-start, we had ERCE was really all compliance and education, and errors were done by counting with much smaller numbers. Post-start, with these changes, we have gone the other direction, and audits and compliance are just part of the pile. And so ERCE is divided into different branches, mostly based on how an employer reports. So CRIS agencies, which are state agencies, get one, school boards get one, and pretty much everybody else is in a different branch. Long time, well, since 2014, what we do is senior staff performs compliance audits. And I'll tell you in a minute about where we find out that we potentially have compliance issues. We don't do any random audits at all. The only random audits are those ones for KERS non-hazardous. What we have found is that they're really not very effective. Random audits, we have 1,400 total employers, 1,430 or something like that, total employers. And we just don't find very much that way. There are other more efficient ways to find errors or problems with compliance. And we find that sometimes if we just do a full audit, we don't want to duplicate anything that the state auditor's doing. We want to be especially careful about not duplicating their work and crossing into their territory where we would be any offense. It's just somewhere we want to be careful. In 2018, before I had this position, ERCE and internal audit got together and developed a plan. Basically, it was a mentoring kind of thing. How do you audit? What's a good audit? What's a good sample size? What are you going to ask for? Why are you going to ask for those things? We recently had Kristen Coffey, our chief auditor, re-review that with her. She was part of that 2018 plan, as was Dwayne. She didn't immediately have any concerns with that plan or any tweaks that she wanted to make. And we've already talked about the House Bill 8 audits that we've done, 5 a year. Okay, how do we find the issues? We get referrals from the APA, which is what some of this has spurred some of this conversation and this ad hoc committee. We get notifications from the Attorney General sometimes that they have reports of really significant fraud issues or whatever that happens to be. But if it hits the Attorney General's office, there's usually some significant underlying issues with that. Legal services will hear about things, tip lines, ERCE staff, just as they're speaking to reporting officials, they'll get an idea that something's not quite right, and they'll coach and train, but if they don't get anywhere with that, they'll report that upwardly, and we might end up with an audit if something it's just still not right with the staff. News sources sometimes will tell us something funny has happened in this city or that county or whatever. The new approach that we're going to take, this is something that Dwan and I talked about a couple of years ago, and we really liked it. We just didn't have the resources, the staff available to commit to this, is to do some sort of annual attestation by the employer. So the idea would be a form, self-audit, so to speak, the series of questions that would get signed by the agency head, not the reporting official. ERC very often works with the reporting official, and that generally is a lower level person in the agency. The big issues come to us through through legislators, that kind of stuff, and we get it from agency heads. So some communication between those two is important, and we think this attestation is a great idea. We actually stole that idea from another pension plan that talked about it, and several other people at that had said they were doing that as well. So we'll ask them things like, who are you reporting as, are you not reporting as retired or unemployed because they have an exempted certification? When was the last time you filled those forms out? When we have those people, then we can go check, do we have these forms? It's that kind of granular pieces. So I think there'll be 20, 30 questions on this attestation every year, but I think it will continue to tweak. Legal, ERCE, and of course internal audit will be asked as we develop that, but that's what we want this new team to do. All right, so my solution, it's not mine. Dwan and I have talked about it. Former Executive Director David Eager was anxious with that too. We started back in 23. What I'd really like to do is push some error correction into employer self-service and let employers do a lot of that. ERCE is a team of more than 20 staff, and most of them work on error corrections for a good chunk of the day, and I feel like that could free up some staff, but that's technically a big lift. That's politically a big lift. A lot of education pieces for that, so we're several years away from doing that. I do hope that the new technology assessment and the new technology project will bring some of that. But for now, we just don't have any way to expand staff other than literally expanding staff. So to do that, we have, we're under KRS Chapter 18A, which is the Department of Personnel. So all KBPA employees fall under 18A with a few very specific exceptions. And the Department of Personnel, in conjunction with Finance Cabinet and the budget cycle, gives us a cap of employees. We were at 270 for a long time. We, in September of 23, went to the KBPA board and said, for a variety of reasons, one of them specifically was ERCE staff to do audits. We would like to increase cap. They gave us that authority to go seek that in September of 23. That finally became a reality in January of 25. There was no money with it, but they did allow the cap increase. So we moved forward with hiring counselors. The plan was to hire entry-level counselors, train them up to take on the normal day-to-day ERCE staff, and then move 3 senior-level counselors over to audit because they will know the most about auditing systems and what to look for and those kinds of things. Those 3 counselors were hired in June of 25. We're going to hire a manager soon. We're still looking for personnel to approve the manager. If we don't have a manager, then we'll just let the group of 3 go, and they'll report directly to Dwan. They'll focus, the last 3 bullets here, they'll focus first on this annual attestation questionnaire. They'll look for expanding coaching opportunities, and they'll potentially, we had recently come up with this idea that they could review external audits, although I think they'll need to look at whether there's value in reviewing all of them or if they're going to wait and actually get referrals on that. So the goals of this plan, the reason we were doing this was first and foremost because we just don't move enough audits through. It's important, and it just doesn't get enough of it done using the staff that's already doing a lot of other responsibilities. So to pull them all off to one side and let them concentrate on that, I think we'll get some more traction in that area. Then we want to implement this attestation. We want to integrate education, coaching, and building trust. We have for years, multiple times over the years. I wouldn't say that's our consistency, and it's certainly not the ERCE staff's approach, but we tend to surprise our employers and they get angry with us. We've seen an uptick in legal issues with employers. What I would like to use this attestation for is to kind of reset expectations all the way up to leadership in our employer groups every year so that they don't get as many surprises. And we wouldn't get as many calls from legislators who have an angry employer saying, why do we do X, Y, and Z? I really think being proactive and partnering with them will help us build that trust relationship. Leveraging existing audits. So every employer who participates with KBPA is audited. They may not all be audited annually, but they all have regular audits. So we don't need to repeat the normal regular audit. What we're looking for specifically is compliance and how are they complying. Which is why I was fascinated, really interested in this exercise, Ed, that you asked Kristen Coffey, our internal auditor, to do. And so this is a clip of the final counts from her report. There are 360 agencies of 4. These are county clerks, fiscal courts, and sheriff's departments from each of the 120 counties. So 360 counties. And we looked at them for 4, she looked at them for 4 years, 21 to 24. Most of the 24 reports weren't quite there. And these are just APA auditors. So a lot of employers have different auditor than the APA, but these are the. So they looked at almost just over 1,400 reports. 1,000 of them were actually available to review. They're really easy to look at on the APA's website. 4 employers, over 9 reports, but in those 4 years, there were 9 reports, but it's only 4 employers. 1% of them actually had a confirmed issue. We'll look at those pretty soon. One of them, 2 of them maybe, were actually ones that Dewan's group wasn't aware of yet. The other ones Dewan's group already had known about. 45 of the potential, the yellow column, that's 12.5% of the 360 had potential issues, expanding over 73 reports. The other thing I want to say out loud is that it's important that it's right. We certainly want them all to be investigated, but there are mechanisms in place that make the member and the systems whole. Once we identify the issues, there's billing, there's interest. We generally don't have much problem with employers getting it right, getting it corrected, making everybody whole. If there are employers who don't want to cooperate, or they're not willing to share data, or they're not willing to pay, that's when legal gets involved. But ERCE Group has been able to be pretty successful with employers on that. Generally, they want to report, they want their employees to get what they're entitled to, and so they're pretty cooperative with ERCE. Okay, looking at those 4 who were identified as yes, there's definitely issue. There's Barron County Fiscal Court, who was referred to KBPA from the APA. They have 78 employees, $108,000 in contributions, over $322,000 in payroll for the year. The issue is that they don't, and this is, as you look at that report, many of the issues appear to be payroll controls and not having them. This one specifically said there were issues with the way that they reported to retirement. Some of them are corrected, but others are not. ERCE is auditing this file. This is one we got referred to Barron County 23 and 24. Clay County has been a problem for longer. It was 22, 23, and 24. In 22, the only problems that they had were with late reporting. So an employer is required to give all pieces of their report by the 10th of the month. If they don't, they get a penalty, a late reporting penalty, not less than $1,000. So for most of these smaller agencies, it's the $1,000 penalty. ERCE knows about those almost immediately. Those are known issues all the time, and the penalty itself usually more than makes up for anything that KPPA had lost, that the CER system had lost. This one again, smaller employer with 30 employees. 22 was late reporting. 23 and 24 gets more interesting. ERCE is auditing those as we speak. And again, we'll get it all back. We expect it to be minimal, but we'll have to do the work to see. Jackson County Fiscal Court, Dewan kind of smiles when he hears about Jackson County because it's been recurring for a long time. They have paid quite a few late penalties. They had a fraud issue that they've been dealing with and trying to correct. They've worked with Kentucky Association of Counties to get money in order to address some of those things. But those are the 21 and the 23 reports. Since then, ERCE, as they work with them, they're used to working with this employer because they've had some significant issues. So they're working on compliance with those pieces. Again, smaller employer, this is 103 employees that they report. Then there's Morgan County Fiscal Court, which was referred to as a yes as well. But they were in 21 and 22. The 23 report is clean. 21 and 22 are only the late reporting penalties. So that is not as significant. However, ERCE representative, as they were working with them on something else, has identified that they paid a bonus amount incorrectly, and so they've been working to identify the bonus amount. And as they were working on the bonus, they found some folks that were not being reported. So now they're auditing them. It's not because of what the APA found. The APA found the late reports, but now they're auditing them because of these missing employers. So they're going to audit from 23 to present. Any questions about those four? I feel like I was kind of all over the place with those details.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, if I might ask a question or two about those four. So this is really interesting work. And when you say on Jackson County and Morgan County that they were not reported to or by the APA, I find that very interesting, because it would then seem to me that it would be difficult to rely on referrals from the APA when they don't necessarily refer everything. Secondly, what you just said about Morgan County is what they did refer really is a minor issue and not the major problem. So there may be a number of potential issues that either were not referred by the APA, were not identified by the APA, but have underlying a fairly significant issue that I don't know how we would actually find out about them.
Yeah, I think those are interesting things. The relying on referrals, I agree that we can't. But back to the funnel page, we're looking at a ton of things. But the more, in my opinion, the one that comes in most often is, well, that's probably not true. I don't know what the counts are, but the information obtained by ERCE staff. That's how we found out about the bonus pay. The other thing I would say is that we also do other kinds of audits. So we do member account audits. Members can see all these details in their member self-service. And while we didn't list them separately, we do get questions from members. So the benefits side of the house will get member calls and say, hey, I made X amount and my self-service account says X, says Y. Why is that? So ERCE will hear from member requests on things like that too. Oh, we did put members. I just can't read. Tips received for members. We did list that here. So I agree with you that we cannot rely merely on the APA, but obviously the APA is a significant source to the state as a whole and does audit a ton of CERS agencies, so you can't ignore them either. They're certainly significant. But I agree that they won't know about everything that is important to us, but they do tell us. The other issue is that they don't always tell the same person. Ed, I think you and I have talked about that before, specific to Clay County. They had reported the first year, let me get back to Clay County. I don't want to make you sick, but the 22 year they had reported to legal, the 23 year they reported to Ryan and me, the 24 year they reported to you, Ed. I got a solution for that too, but we'll get to that if you don't mind. But I agree with you. These are interesting questions to ask ourselves. Where should we put resources to get us the biggest return on these resources? Is that it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the audits of the 45 over the 360. So I believe there are 73 reports, but 45 of them are separate agencies. That's about 12% of the 360. I did a fairly quick review of the first 2 or 3 pages. And what I found was very, very often it was specific to controls. Their payroll was not right. And I gave you a couple examples here. So I looked at Breckenridge County. Dwan and his team have not done any of this, and I am not the ERCE expert. I'm just deeply invested in a great solution that will help us eliminate the largest number of problems with the smallest number of resources. But so Breckenridge County in 21 had finding number 2, that they had inadequate controls over timesheets. So the issue was people were paid for an hour lunch when they were supposed to have half-hour lunches, or their timesheets didn't match up. That is not something that KBPA can fix for the employer. What we have to have is what they paid them gets reported to us. And for Breckenridge County, that was true. There are others who have that issue, and they said, oh yeah, by the way, there were these 5 employees where their retirement doesn't match up. That is something we absolutely could go audit. But there's not much we can do about telling them to fix their timesheets, because back to the first page where our legislative authority is really about compliance, and are they telling us what they paid their employees? How they paid them and what they can do is perhaps not within our purview, and maybe that's something for this ad hoc committee to discuss. What really are the boundaries? What are the things we want to look at? Ballard County clerk is a similar kind of issue in that this county clerk does not keep a ledger for leave balances, and the APA was concerned that leave balances then may not be correct. But if they're reporting to us the leave that they have at the time they report leave, which they don't always report leave on every row, but like at retirement, as long as they're reporting what their records show, then there's not a whole lot KBPA can do about that. So I'm not sure either of those are really actionable findings. They're interesting, and they certainly could have an effect on our members, and our members should absolutely be encouraged to watch their self-service accounts and make sure that they're getting credit appropriately. But I'm not sure that most of these 45 are going to end in actionable. They might, but not the first couple pages that I was looking at. But again, I'm not an auditor, so we'd have to kind of discuss what guardrails and boundaries CERS trustees would be interested in seeing. I didn't say earlier, but one of the other issues that we have that's become more and more significant when we had auditing spread out through all of ERCE was that it was hard to report on. I think providing a group will give us a way to give regular reporting of what's being audited, where do we have issues, those kinds of the reporting that will give some oversight to trustees, give them a more insight into it. I know, Ed, one of your frustrations is that you didn't know about X, Y, or Z. Mr. Cheatham said at the KPPA meeting last week that there had been 0 CERS audits done since the split. I'm not quite sure where that misunderstanding came from, but that is not true at all. We have, let me see if I can find my list. City of Elkhorn City, Elliott County Ambulance, Anderson County Fiscal Court, City of Frankfort, City of Taylor Mill. Every single one of the school boards were looked at for sick leave policy compliance. And of course, Barron County Fiscal Court, Clay County Fiscal Court, and Jackson County are all under audit as well.
If I could, to that
Yeah.
point, Rebecca, it's interesting that's the case, and you're right that the stand-up of this ad hoc committee will give a focal point for that information to be reported to. But I was not aware of any of those audits or what they found. So even though there wasn't necessarily a oversight committee that could have been told about that, I certainly could have been made aware of that so that I could have then forwarded that information to trustees.
I absolutely agree with you, Ed. I think that's one of the issues, and that's actually what I was trying to say. For me, the lack of good reporting is the reason. You weren't made aware of these because, frankly, it didn't occur to me, because most audits don't find much. And when they do, it's pretty de minimis, the amounts that they find. So they audit, they correct, the systems are made whole, the members are made whole. That has not been something that DeJuan or I brought to you or to the trustees because of the lack of, I don't know, wow behind that, interest behind that. So what I'm saying is perhaps this audit committee could help give staff some direction on what you do want to know about, because that would absolutely have been my fault, that it's just something I didn't think was significant enough. Even sending you the APA referrals is a relatively recent thing to do because you have shown more and more interest in those details, Ed. And so, yeah, I would never want to withhold that from you, but it was not significant enough that I realized it's something you wanted to hear. So, yeah, I agree. You absolutely need to know these things, but that's, I'm getting better at it every day.
No,
that's just not something I've done real well.
I greatly appreciate that sentiment. But if I could, one other point in this area. If before I believe we're scheduling the meeting for the ad hoc committee sometime in the second week of October, if prior to that time, now we will show this recording to that committee, but prior to that time, if we could actually have some reporting on, if you look back over the last 5 years and the legal cases that we have been involved in, either because ERSI turned it over to legal or because it involved reporting issues, I'd really like to have a sense of how many legal matters we got entangled in this space, and to some extent, if we could find it, what would be the relative amount of money that was spent on those legal issues.
Sure, I'll take that one. I mean, I think that was actually cited in the last meeting, and that would lend itself to we found those. But yeah, we do have a high legal cost. I think Lyle mentioned that number in the last meeting. But that would articulate that we found them and we're pursuing them, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying about that is not so much that they were found, but that they bubbled over into legal issues. Because I think when you look at Three Rivers Jail, something that we've been embroiled in for a number of years, the legal cost around that may well have been mitigated if we had had a structured way to actually audit that on the front end, so that we possibly could have nipped it in the bud. That's really what I'm after, is how many of those could have been nipped in the bud prior to escalating into full-blown legal matters.
Sure. And we can have that prepared for the committee's work. That's probably outside of the scope of today, but
Yes,
I'll talk to Michael and see, we would have to add him to address that. So
Yes.
we will do that.
I would add also that a lot of these, when they get turned over to legal, don't go outside of staff. So sometimes it's a demand letter or a conversation with the agency's legal, and then they comply and it's done. But it's not enough for the ERCE rep to speak to the reporting official and then get data. Sometimes it goes to legal just for something that's internal, and you're not going to see a bill for that. It's not going to show up in Michael's reports. A lot of these get resolved by legal internally. So that's a little harder to put a number on, but those, I would say those are the ones that really are being, as you say, nipped in the bud early, is the ones that we can just deal with internally. All right, well,
Yeah.
we're out
And
of time.
Mr. Webb, I know we're close to the time we asked for. Do you have a few more minutes, or do we need to kind of get to the last slide?
Okay.
Well, your
Well,
choice.
this is the last slide.
Okay.
We're good.
Sorry.
No. I was just going to say these are the things that we have taken into consideration since we were able to get these. We got these people hired. We increased that cap. We got the people hired. We met again with Kristen to make sure she was okay with the process that we've been doing. The fix for the APA, Ed, this was what I wanted a little bit of information from you and or Mr. Webb on. So I'm suggesting that we create this KBPA audit referrals group, and we can give it not only to the APA, but anybody who's auditing our employers, so that they could use this. And then we can set this, so an email distribution group is, you can change the people who get these. So it could go to you and John and Ryan and Duan and whoever else we want on that pile. And then, so all the referrals get to all the people at the same time. It would just come to your email like any other. It just was sent by this group. If that's something you guys are interested in, let me know who you would like in that group, and we can move that.
Okay, great.
Okay, the next steps I think are, besides we need to hire this manager, but instituting this attestation, which I hope will be as of July 1 of 26. I think we'll get it in line, and then we can put it in fiscal year end, unless that team identifies a better time of year for employers to do something like that. It's not going to be without effort from our employers to get that filled out. We can keep evaluating referrals. We certainly will still keep working on the ones that we have. There's quite a pile with a limited number of resources at the moment. So, and then we have this opportunity to review external audits. Part of the attestation or the annual report from the employers could be, give us a copy of your most recent external audit so that we can look at those. I don't know. I think that team needs to look at how effective that is. One of the things, Ed, that you and I disagree on is who should do it. We've talked about this. We agree to disagree. You think that internal audit should do it. I talked to Dewan about what percentage is auditing time and what percentage is compliance and education and the trust building, the relationship building that ERCE, in my opinion, does better than audit. Audit's great. That's their bailiwick, but what percentage? And he said it's a tough number to get to, Rebecca. He said if the audit finds nothing, then it's mostly audit. So maybe 65% audit. If the audit finds things, that percentage goes down in a big hurry because there's a ton of back and forth with compliance issues. For example, I can't remember now if it's Morgan or Jackson County who had the bonus issue, but he said that one really quickly gets to 20-25% auditing and 75-80% working on the compliance issues. So those are the kinds of things I think this audit committee needs to be looking at. What kind of reporting do the boards want? What committee would they want it to? I assume the audit this ad hoc committee will go away eventually, and you'll replace it with something else. Who do you want that reporting to go to, and who do you want to do these, and what kind of resources do you have? I don't know that we have a lot of cap space left to put another team in internal audit for this. And I think if we did, we still have to retain the ERCE team that we've gotten because a lot of things are going to get chucked over the fence. If audit's going to do the audit, then ERCE would have to do all the compliance pieces still. So I'm not sure that that's our most efficient approach. But I do think, I look forward, well, I'm not going to watch you all on Facebook, I'm sorry, while I'm retired. But I think it will be an interesting committee meeting, and there are a lot of things to talk about with this.
Yeah, just a couple of things, if I might, on that, Rebecca. I do think that the fact that we have almost 1,200 employers puts us in a really unique position. K has about 200 employers. That's the same amount or thereabout that the teachers' pension plan has, and teachers allows their internal auditors to audit. I'm a strong believer that auditors audit because, just as we've talked about, there are going to be some things that are not going to be black and white, that are going to be intuitive, and if you're not an investigator, you may not come to those things very easily or very quickly. So I agree that the group that you've already put in place, if C were to decide to do it another way, you would still be able to utilize the group that you put in place for what you would do with the K audits. So there would still be a group available to do that. But I think that we're looking for not solving this issue for a third of our employers, but solving this issue for all of our employers. And I think a group that has a little more dexterity with just auditing and nothing about competency or anything like that. It doesn't come to that, but it just comes to who understands how to audit and what ultimately you're looking at when you do audit. And you're right, there are a number of entities that won't in the first go round take a lot of time to put in a good position because they've never had issues in the past. But I think, again, our legal numbers and the number of entities that we've had to engage in legal matters is going to be instructive here. So I'll just wait to get that information so we can see what it says.
Yeah, Ed, you and I've talked about this before. I would use the same argument to say that employer reporting expertise is the thing that's needed, because as you get in there looking at a retired or employed and they say those are exempted out, you have to know that they can only have so many exemptions. You have to know that there's a list of them. The business side access that they would need in order to verify the things that the employers are telling them are the things that ERCE does all the time and have been trained to do for years. So I understand your point. I do. That's a place you and I just don't disagree. Just don't agree.
Yeah, and I don't see this being done by audit in a vacuum. I see it being done in conjunction with the ERC staff for the very reasons that you've spoken to. But the reality of it is, every quarter when Mike Lamb goes through our financials, we're talking about the negative cash flow in our system. And every time that the legislators want to talk about what's going on in a system, they focus on negative cash flow. And if we have an opportunity to put something in place that can mitigate that number, if not possibly erase that number, that's something that we've got to, I think, put all hands on deck to get done.
Well, I agree with that, Ed. That's maybe something I presented at PPOB. We've had positive cash flow for quite a while. So, Rebecca, correct me if I'm wrong, but even if we did have negative, this is not going to move the needle.
I don't anticipate
we've
these.
had positive.
Yeah.
Not in our system. Not in our system, Ryan. We've got negative cash flow at the year-end meeting that we just had, both for non-has and has. But that's neither here nor there.
Because I don't want to be embarrassed at PPOB. So let me, Sherry, if you wouldn't mind, just put a note. The last PPOB, I think, that'd be great. We'll send that out.
Yeah, and Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind sending me this presentation, it really is a great presentation. I'd love to be able to forward it on even before our meeting to members of the ad hoc committee, so they will have had an opportunity to have looked at it, looked through it, formulate whatever questions they might have for when they come to the meeting.
I love that idea. I will say, Ed, that's one of the reasons I don't always tell you about all of these audits, because the amount is so small. For example, when we had the issue with Louisville Metro, I called you immediately because those are huge numbers. Those are the numbers that move needles. Most of these are very de minimis. Important, all the same, because every member is important, but not huge totals.
The jail case, when we add up what we spend in legal fees on that, not de minimis.
I agree, but those are not the ones coming in. These are not the ERCE audits. That's a legal case, and those you know about all of the legal cases.
That was the end of the presentation.
Thanks.
All right, thank you for that. I want to note for the rest of the committee that in a follow-up to that presentation, Mr. Owens on my behalf requested the work papers and opinions derived from the audits completed to date, and my understanding is that the documentation from those audits was not retained. My initial comment I want to make after that presentation is that I appreciate the relationships that ERC has built with our employers, and as the committee considers how best to address this issue, we certainly want to ensure that those relationships are not compromised. So before we move on, are there any questions or other comments from the committee members on the presentation? All right, if not, then let's move to item 5B, Mr. Surratt.
I might start on this one, Mr. Webb, if that's okay.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
So some of this has been really good conversation. Obviously, Rebecca felt pretty passionate. It's kind of awkward to have a video, but I think it was important, right? She had good information. She's well thought out. So a couple things she touched on that we've implemented. So we did have the centralized email to go to both the K and the C CEOs Dewan's group, myself, and others. So that was communicated. Sherry, yes, you have that up. Last week, yeah. So we did create that, and then we will follow up. One of the things that we thought would be beneficial to add to Rebecca's presentation, she didn't mention on, but is one that she supported before we left, was to meet with the state auditor and focus in on things that were, things that are important for us, right? That list. We don't have that list together, but we did mention it. I know Chief of Staff over there really well. Worked with Allison Ball for a long time in my previous life. So we anticipate that to be well received. So we want to just have a centralized, so we don't miss things. Because as Rebecca said, it went to Michael, it went to me, it went to Ed. So it's just going to go to everybody. I think that was received well based on the feedback, but we're going to have a conversation to make sure that's the case, focus in on a couple things. Sherry, if you wouldn't mind going, so we did both Dewan did a report for the 2 under audit that were referred by the APA, the status, if there was any collections. I think Dewan's conclusion were they were both de minimis in terms of less than 100 employers, which I think Rebecca touched on. And then the other 2 that are under audits, she gave the list of the full audits. Sherry, if we could go to the funnel. So Rebecca kind of focused a little bit on this. I asked Juan to kind of focus in on really how this works. So the funnel this is kind of the best guess based on experience. Really communications. That communication, working with them is important. And that's 75%. 75% or the coaching that happens, right? And one of the things Rebecca didn't say, the only gripe she had about ERSI is they almost go too far. But I thought, wow, that's interesting. They go almost too far to help to that coaching, and I think the numbers demonstrate that. 75% working with them collectively. But we do get to the 7.5 that is kind of more structured for it. You need to do, please do. Those kind of conversations. And that helps because you've already done the coaching. Then we get kind of the compliance audits. There has been some conducted. It's de minimis, and I think that's success of the higher levels. But yes, and that's the filter in from the tips and the APA, et cetera. But if it gets to that stage, I would consider serious. And another thing that I asked Mike when I started is stop handling stuff. We had too many legal cases. I think this is a success story. 2 went to Michael. He'll talk about that in a minute. And Ed gave us a couple of kind of memos that we have. I appreciate that, Ed, talking about kind of the cap raise, the legal stuff. So Michael, if you want to cover the next memo, I believe is from you.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Here? Sherry, if you would go back to that funnel. Because earlier in the presentation that Rebecca gave, she talked about there being only 1.1% of employers who were registered yes on the APA audits. When you look at this, it indicates that there were 5 CERS compliance audits completed since 2021. And 2 of those, because they were more significant in nature and because they dealt with larger dollar amounts, went to legal. That's not 1%, that's 40%. So of the very small amount of audits that were done, 40% of them were sent to legal. If I could just read the email that Rebecca sent me on her last day. Compliance audits are not formal audits. They are education and coaching. The issues are resolved, so they are not formally summarized, although I do have an idea of a closing summary. They would be documented in the employer's file and journal entries. The exception is the memos, Ed, that Dewan created for you on the APA Audit 4. I have attached both memos for your reference. If the audit ends up being escalated to legal, then there is more documentation. Legal does have several of these audits, and you may want to work with Michael Board to get updates on these on the legal side. So my question then is, she's indicating that the three that got solved, that they weren't codified. There is no audit trail, if you will, of those. But when they are forwarded to legal, that there's more documentation. So the two that were forwarded to legal, we would expect to be able to get documentation on what those two entailed. So I say that just as a preference to Michael speaking about it.
Sure, and the math to me is kind of, it's on the slide, right? So there was 5 conducted, 4 that were undertaking. There's 1,450 participants. So, we can do the math on the percent. I don't think it was wrong. But Rebecca's specific percent was of what internal audit looked at, right?
Sure.
So we're talking about 2 different percents, but of almost 1,500 employers, there was, 5 plus 4, right? So the math kind of works out. And again, Kristen should speak to her math.
Okay.
I asked Aaron to come today. So a lot of the documentation is really going to be in kind of the employer files, that kind of stuff, and it's also going to be in legal. So maybe it's applicable just to go to Michael on the legal, and we can circle back if the documentation would be in the notes, that kind of stuff. But Michael, if you're available to talk about your memo.
Yes. So as Ryan said, there were, and I'll get to the rest of this memo in just a second, but there were two matters that came from Dewan's group from ERSI that resulted from his audits, and we're working on those in KPPA legal right now. Discussing those matters here in an open public session is probably not advisable, simply because anytime legal is working on something like that, there's always that potential for litigation that could come from that and things that we're working on. And so going into those matters in detail with what the issues are and what the potential is there, I think is better reserved for a closed session setting when we can have one of those. But we do have those 2 matters. I will say that those matters and all of these matters, as you'll see in the memo, we handle these in-house here at KBPA Legal's office. So we do not send these to outside counsel. So just the bigger picture of this, since April 1st, 2021, the KPPA Office of Legal Services has received 17 referrals from ERSI. Now, like I said, only 2 of those came from the audits that ERSI has done. The other 15 were other matters. They were, invoice matters or things like that, which are not relevant to this discussion, but I wanted to provide holistic numbers here for everyone to see. And again, we handle even those matters, we handle all in-house. We don't farm out to outside counsel and incur outside legal expenses. We handle all of that internally. But, whether it came from a referral from ERSI, whether it got to us just as a collection matter for invoices, or whether it got to us as a result of an audit, no matter how it gets to us, we don't send it outside. They're all handled internally. And we have, of the 17 matters we've received, we've resolved 11 of those. There's 6 that are still pending, but of those 11 we've resolved, you can see the dollar amount that we've collected and the percentage of the total amount referred. So we've collected 96.6% of the total amount that was referred to us. That 3.4% that we didn't collect was the result of either a small amount that was written off or the result of waived interest that we worked with the CEO on to, the employers asked us if we would take this amount, if we would waive interest from this point forward. CEO said yes. And so we did that to collect the vast majority of the amount that was outstanding. And so that's that. that's the legal side, the litigation cost with this, with these matters that have risen to us from ERSI. I can pause here and take questions on this memo, or I can move on to the next memo that Ryan's asked me to cover just briefly. So, Mr. Webb, if you want to stop here, you want me to move on?
Any questions from committee members on this memo?
Well, Mr. Chair, I do have a question for Michael on his memo. On the 17 issues that you're talking about, Michael, and understanding not all of them came to you from ERSI, but there has to be a realization that they came to you because there was some disconnect between the benefits being reported and the payroll of that agency. So in 17, you're talking about 17, that's a number that's significantly smaller than 1,200. 17, you collected over $1 million. That, to me, argues against the de minimis nature of these inquiries.
Well, and I would say that they did all come to us from ERSI, but a lot of those came to us, and I don't want to confuse the conversation here, and trying to provide a holistic picture. A lot of those came to us as this entity, they've reported everybody, they're not reporting their people, they're not doing anything like that. They've reported everybody, we've issued the invoice, they didn't pay this invoice. And so now that may have happened 1 month, 2 months. ERSI's well aware of it. ERSI's contacted them on more than one occasion saying, you've got this outstanding invoice, you've got that outstanding invoice. And ERSI has done all that communication in the background and they're not paying. So then ERSI sends it to legal to say, hey, legal, can you contact them and advise them that if they don't pay, we're going to have to take an additional step here in the legal realm. And then when we do that, they pay. And so the process is that ERSI's on top of it. ERSI knows about it. ERSI has done their steps. And then when the employer still isn't paying, ERSI sends it to us to step in and make that final step. So that's how that has played out.
Thank you.
So then on the next memo that's in your material quickly, this is just speaking to the, as Rebecca, you heard in her presentation mention, that we have hired, and starting in January of 25, we got the increased cap. The employee cap. She mentioned at the beginning of her presentation, we're subject to a cap of employees that is put on us by the personnel cabinet and other entities that control that. And so we had requested an increased cap. We received that in January of this year. That gave us some flexibility to do some things. And so that started off, really kicked off this process and gave us some flexibility. And so in June, we hired 3 retirement systems counselors ones, the entry level of that position. And they're going to work on the day-to-day work, and that freed up more experienced staff that are able to focus on employer audits. And so that listed 3 position titles of those positions. And as you heard Rebecca said, they are working on hiring a manager for that group. Someone else may be able to give you a more detailed information on where that hiring stands at the moment. I don't have that, but this is where those position titles and what's happening.
Yeah, so just for the balance of those positions the board voted on, Mike Lamb is going to cover that. I know it's not for today, but Mike Lamb is going to cover that, addressing similar type of issues with additional resources. But for today, thank you, Michael, in terms of those. Dwan's on to talk about those positions to how that transition's working.
Yeah, just real quick. Yeah, we hired the 3 new counselors in June. We have trained those 3 new counselors to do day-to-day work. So currently, we have our retirement programs manager of a file web team. We have a retirement benefit consultant and a retirement systems counselor for currently working on the 4 audits that we have. They're dedicated to those right now, trying not to do any other work so we can, try to get those completed. Um, if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But we have them dedicated to do that right now until the manager position is approved from the personnel cabinet, and then we'll get those positions established.
So,
All right, does that
Mr. Chair,
cover everything from BNC?
so I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I think that includes the ask that Ed had of the additional information past the video. So thank you for the ability to talk about this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thought that comes to mind, understanding efficiency, but when we talk about some of these audits not finding anything, I mean, I've been a government fiscal officer for 5 years now. I've had a clean audit every time, and every time I still get audited the next year. So, I mean, there is some value in the compliance aspect of that, and I understand. I think it may have been in some of the conversations after the presentation that was showed earlier, but it's my understanding that the chief auditor approved a 5-year plan to audit all employers, and we've seen here we've completed 5 audits. We've got 4 in progress. So, if it is the goal to touch all of our employers, we've got some work to do on this initiative. Are there any other questions or comments from any committee members? Mr. Cheatham?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to just touch on a couple of things real quick before I guess Ed's going to kind of cover where this started with us. But I think in one of the previous meetings, I made the comment, you can always make numbers look the way you want them to look if you really try hard enough. But at the same time, there's called simple math. And I'm going to go back to the auditor's report first. Actually, I take that back. I want to go back to the issue of the 5 audits that were reported as completed since 2021. If you don't have an audit trail, you did not conduct an audit. That's just simple in my mind. We've got nothing to go back on to determine what happened with those 5. Whether it may very well have been an educational issue, but were we talking about issues that went on for several years? If so, then we've certainly got issues with how we conduct our continuing education as far as how to fill out the forms correctly and report correctly. I think the public comment that we got alluded to that a little bit. But of the, just more for the information of the committee members. I know a lot of you have got public service background. Some of you haven't. The reason why we keep pointing back to the state auditor is the only one that really does county audits. And those audits are limited to the fiscal court, clerk's office, and the sheriff's office. You do not have the state auditor going out and doing audits of the library board, the ambulance service, or the water district. If they go out and start doing those audits, that's because there is a problem, and that problem had already been discovered somewhere else along the way. Of the 300 employers that fall under that blanket, that leaves us with nearly 1,000 employers that we are entirely relying on whatever kind of audit that at best might be filed with Department of Local Government. We have no mechanism in place, from what I can tell, to go back and review those. So it it's turning into almost a self-reporting problem. And you can see that in the APA's numbers and from the internal auditor. You know, I'm sitting here looking at the numbers and I added them up. Of the 4 years that she looked at, and Kristen, I hate to, I'll let you defend anything I might have wrong here, but near as I can tell by looking at this, there were 371 audits that you weren't able to look at. So I really have a hard time counting those in our numbers. So our total number of audits that we were actually able to review were 1,068. Of those, there are 9 that we know there was a problem, and another 73 that are potential problems. Not hard to do the math. That's 82 out of 1,068. That's 7.68%. Not 1%. Not 40%, Ed, but certainly not 1%. My issue is, of all the entities out there, counties knowing that the APA is going to be coming in and looking at them each year, they've probably got the best looking audits of any of our employers out there. When you go out and do, you know, we may want to define what we mean by audit. I'm talking about a payroll and a benefits audit. I'm not talking about coming out and auditing anything near like what their APA is doing, much less what their external auditors come in and do. Our only focus is payroll. And how do we create a program that provides a system that we can rely on, that we can ensure that every dollar that's supposed to be coming into the system comes into the system? Because here's where my issue really comes from. If we've got underreporting going on for whatever reason, whether it's just, you know, neglect, not understanding, regardless of whether somebody is fraud, then you're going to have an employee. And I've been in the retail side of the financial business for 30 plus years, and I can tell you right now, I don't have a client one that's bothered to look at what their Social Security statement is until they're ready to start drawing Social Security. Fact is, I had a senior level state official over the weekend not realize they were even in the retirement system, much less know what they have in it. So to rely on some type of system where we are relying on employee to go in and double check what the numbers are is just not realistic. So I just wanted to interject that at this point because I want to kind of defend the numbers and the comments that have been made in the previous 2 or 3 meetings over this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cheatham. I'd perhaps add to that even in the cases where the APA is looking at these, fiduciary audits offer reasonable assurance, which is not complete assurance, and management maintains full responsibility for the information presented, and that should be stated in the independent auditor's report. So even in those cases, there's not necessarily completely discounts the need for another look from our group for our purposes. Is there any other questions or comments from the committee members?
Well, I would just suggest also that we have an expert who's an auditor on staff, and I guess I'm still trying to understand why we are resistant to using her in this role. I guess that would be my comment and my question.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Carver. I think that's exactly what this committee's here to flesh out. Any other comments or questions? If not, then let's move on to item number 6 on the agenda, APA referrals. Mr. Owens, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. And I'm really glad that we got an opportunity to listen to the meeting that we had with Rebecca, because I didn't catch it in the meeting, but I caught it as I listened to it. she raised what I believe is the sentinel question here. Where should we put resources to get the biggest return? That's what we're trying to determine here. I think she had it 100% correct. Where do you put the resources to get the biggest return? And if we have 1,200 employers that we want to have examined, that probably needs to be with the auditor. I'll simply say May 14th received the first referral letter from the APA, contacted Ryan, Rebecca about it. The KPPA very receptive to it, to what we were going to do as a result of it. It was interesting, as Rebecca stated, that this project started in 2023, but the employees were hired in June of 25. So after the first referral came to me, then we hire the employees, even though there was at the time concern that we might want to do it a different way. So in consultation with the leadership of our board, we determined that we would respond to the APA with a letter. It's in board book. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review it, but that is my report here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Any questions or comments from the committee members? Okay, it seems in these referrals, Auditor Ball's office is advising that we examine the issue further based upon the findings by her office, and I think I would agree that the additional findings by ERCE that were not referred by the auditor's office seem to support the position that we need a more robust process to review contributions across the enterprise. If there are no other comments, let's move to item number 7, Chief Auditor Investigation. Ms. Coffey, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. I wanted to start this. I know we have some new members on the CERS board, and I haven't been able to engage with the trustees, with some trustees on this committee as much as I have some others. So I just wanted to give a little background on me. I have over 21 years of experience as an internal auditor. I started my career auditing just like the APA. I looked at fiscal courts, I looked at sheriffs, I looked at the county clerks, ambulance services. I'm extremely familiar with these types of entities and the types of communications and what it takes to build a relationship with these individuals. That is how I started my career. It's what I was trained, that's how I was trained to audit. I've talked to several other retirement systems. We KPPA are a member of the Association of Public Pension Fund Auditors. One of the great things about that group is you can send out questions and other experts can answer you. And so even back in 2018, we reached out and asking, how do you handle your employer audits? Where's this housed? Who does this? And 90% of those people said it's handled within our internal audit group. Kentucky Teachers handles it within their internal audit group. Your audit group is made up of people who are trained to look for audit and compliance issues. And that's what's at question here, audit and compliance. No doubt that if we go out there and we find an issue, it could be that we would suggest some training and some education, and ERCE would be the perfect group to handle that. It would absolutely be the one I would think this committee would recommend handle any education or training. We would work hand in hand with them, but auditing and compliance is a trained skill. The state has a job classification set aside specifically for auditing and investigations. There's a reason for that. It takes a special education. It takes background. If you want, we have presented, or we will present, a plan to look at all 1,200 auditors within a 5-year rotating calendar. Throwing out the first year, because that'll be a learning curve, getting your staff, looking at the big ones. But starting year 2, a 5-year plan. That's 60 audits a year if we have 4 staff members. It's aggressive. But people who are trained to audit and know what they're looking for could absolutely get out there and do this on a 5-year rotating plan. I don't know. Sherry's got the table pulled up. I mean, I can talk about this and I can talk about the work that we did on this, but I think it's been covered. I think that Mr. Cheatham hit on something. This is just your APA audits, and not all of these were actually conducted by the APA. The APA cannot do all of these. They actually have firms that are hired out that do some of these audits, but the APA looks over those. I would agree. As someone who has done these audits and seen audits that are not covered by your APA group, your APA audits are going to be your cleanest. They know they're getting looked at and that they're getting looked at by someone who is coming in with a fine-tooth comb. Your cities, your libraries, your ambulance service that don't get looked at like that, those need a closer look. Those may be, I'm not saying there's going to be a concern. They definitely need to be looked at. And someone who is trained to look for audit and compliance issues could probably give you a better result. There will absolutely need to be communications with these groups if something is found. That communication can come from us, it can come from the committee, it can come from the board chair, it can come from KPPA executive director. We would work with this committee to ensure that any communication that went to these groups was worded exactly the way that you wanted it worded, signed by whoever you wanted it signed. We understand the importance of keeping these relationships. Again, I have worked with these groups, not here, but it's the same, the elected officials, the people who run these areas. I know how sensitive it can be. We would not communicate anything that this committee did not want communicated. If there was training that needed to be done, I'd absolutely refer that to ERC and let the experts step in and do that. That is their area of expertise, one of their area of expertise. We're not trying to step on toes or take anything away from them. They have done a wonderful job with our employers. They absolutely should continue to work with them. But when it comes to audit and compliance, I think you want to look at an expert in that field. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about this spreadsheet or anything else that I've gone over.
I've got a question. You said with 4 auditors, the plan is to try to do 60 a year. Is that correct?
Well, each auditor would be doing 60 a year.
Oh, okay. All right. I misunderstood. I was just trying to get my numbers right. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, and I appreciate the position, Ms. Coffey, that the audit engagement doesn't have to be an adversarial relationship. My wife's an auditor, so I certainly don't feel that way. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee members? I might just add, kind of tacking on to some of the previous conversation, that the pension reporting is a part of the payroll process. So the findings for payroll controls does resonate with me as a flag to prioritize some due diligence with that employer. And as mentioned earlier, the APA is only auditing counties, so we need a mechanism to make sure the cities and the special purpose government entities and such are reviewed on a cyclical basis. So I appreciate the plan there. So we move on to item number 8, next steps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'll be quick. Sherry, if you could go to page 41 in board book, please. Thank you. This is the open fraud tip cases, and Michael Board referred to it Ryan referred to it as one of the areas and ways that we would get information about failure of employers to report all employees. This report was filed with the KPPA Audit Committee on August 26th of 2025. The first notation there lists a tip that came in December 13 of 2022. And the explanation of that tip was failure of employer to report all employees in regular full-time positions. The status of that report or that tip is that legal is investigating it. Well, that's almost 3 years. Sherry, if you would go to page 46, please. This is KRS 61505, and part of the next steps is we're going to ask the General Assembly to give some clarification to one I of KRS 61505 states other tasks and duties solely or jointly by the boards of Kentucky Retirement Systems or the County Employee Retirement Systems. So as I read that, I think it says that the CERS board, the KRS board, has the right either jointly together or solely independently to ask other tasks of KPPA. And I perceive this to be a task that we are asking of KPPA. And the clarification that I'm asking, that I will ask them for is, if you meant to say that KPPA could say no, then please adjust the statute to say that. Additionally, we will seek to get an elevation of the chief auditor so that a division of employer audits can be placed under her so that we can get coverage of the 1,200 employees, employers in the CERS system. And finally, Mr. Chair, let me just say that this was never about anyone's ability or inability to do it. And Rebecca framed it completely correctly. Where should we put the resources to get the biggest return? And for the 4 employees that we're looking for to be part of internal audit, we believe that that gives us the opportunity to have the biggest, most profound return than anything else we could do. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you. I'll take any questions anyone may have.
I believe that structure aligns with, I used to work for the state of Indiana's counterpart, and I believe that structure aligns with how they do it as well. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee members on next steps?
Steve, could you explain what you mean by that last remark? I think I know, but I want to be sure. So you said that structure is in line. What do you mean it's in line?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Carver. What Mr. Owens described there, where internal audit does some audits of the employers for contribution compliance, and under the internal auditor there, and the internal audit director in their case, and I think they do sometimes for some of the back and forth that goes on, shift some of that to the employer reporting group. But that structure, as far as the initial audit investigation is concerned, that Mr. Owens described, I believe aligns with how Indiana does it as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, from that position of governance here on the topic, I think the suggestion to downplay Auditor Ball's referral and examine the issue more closely is certainly a non-starter for me. As the committee considers how best to address this issue. We certainly want to contemplate the internal control framework, and I think one of the goals of this committee should be how we do so with the utmost transparency for our members and other stakeholders. So, well, this being a special meeting, we cannot consider any other business, so there being no further business, this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Steve.